Hello and welcome to Sincerely Speaking. Today's episode is going to be slightly different from what you are accustomed to in this podcast. And the reason is because I want to use this episode to address a question that was very consistently asked of me, and when I was in conversations with other peers and mentors, I realized that it is a very real concern as we transition from one year into the next, and as we progress into 2023, and as January starts coming to a close. I thought it might be a very appropriate time to address this question, which again just kept coming up over and over and over in my conversations, both with clients, with friends, and with peers and mentors. And it's this idea of clarity. As we end a year and start transitioning into the new one, many of us start thinking more deliberately and more intentionally about what we get to do moving forward. What are we going to shift? What are we going to change? What are we going to focus on? And more importantly, a lot of us start asking ourselves the question, how? How am I going to get from A to B or from A to Z, wherever we want to head and wherever we want to go, depending on our goals? So, very often, as we start engaging in this process of figuring out what we want to do and how we want to do it, we start wondering if we have the capabilities, if we really know what we get to do, if we are really clear on what our path should be, or even on whether we get to pivot or stay the course or what we have to do. And very often I find that a lot of us are paralyzed by this notion or this feeling of not being clear. So on this episode of Sincerely Speaking, which will probably be a little bit shorter than most of my episodes, I want to focus on what clarity really is, where it really comes from, and what we get to do moving forward to feel like we are clear enough to take action. So are you ready? Let's dive right in. Last week, I had the blessing and the privilege of driving to Tampa from the West Palm Beach area where I live in Florida to go with my daughter to the all-state honor choir rehearsal and concert. She was selected to be part of the all-state choir, which was an amazing thing. She is considered one of the top singers in the state, and I don't say that to brag. I mean, that's all her. I can't sing to save my life. But here's why I tell you this. While we were heading over there, I, of course, engaged my GPS because I wasn't sure where to go. And the GPS took us through this route that took us through a field area, right? A countryside where there's a lot of sugarcane plantations and corn farms and all these things. But there's canals and lakes all around. So it's actually heading towards Lake Okeechobee, if you know anything about Florida. And it was dense fog. When I tell you it was dense, it was really, really dense. Like we could barely see 100 feet in front of us. Now, I didn't know the road. It was an unfamiliar road, and then there was this fog. So I could barely see 100 feet ahead of me, but I knew that if the GPS was functioning accurately, I could trust that that road was eventually going to lead me to where I needed to go. So during that time when the fog was really dense, I just kept focusing on what I could see in front of me, on the yellow lines in front of me, the yellow and white lines that could direct me in that little space that I could actually see, where I felt like I could move forward slowly, but I could move forward. I knew I wasn't going to be derailed. I knew I wasn't going to end up on a ditch or a canal, which I didn't. And eventually, as I kept driving, the road became clearer. The fog started lifting. It was less and less intense and less dense, and I began to gain clarity. The reason I tell you the story is because just as in the fog, clarity doesn't come instantaneously. It doesn't just happen. And yes, we have instances in which we feel like it does, but if we're honest with ourselves and if we really stop to think about those moments, we have been mulling over the question, or we have been thinking about it, or we posted the question and our subconscious just kept working on it without our awareness being fully on it. But we had been working on the question for a while before we gained that moment of clarity. And the truth of the matter is that in life, in general, it doesn't matter what you're thinking about, your clarity, your full sense of clarity is not going to come from a momentary inspiration. It's going to come gradually, just the same way that the fog gradually lifted and we could see more and more on the road, and eventually we had greater clarity on where we got to go, right? So it is important to understand, and this is the first distinction, this is the first thing that I want you to understand, that clarity doesn't happen instantaneously and it doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually as you continue to move and take action. If we had stuck to that spot where the fog was so dense, yeah, this is where the example loses its power, right? Eventually it would have lifted anyway, but we would not have gained the level of clarity that we did, and we would not have made the forward movement that we did if we had just stopped there and waited for the fog to lift so that we could have instant visibility, right? So if you are just sitting there waiting for the moment of inspiration, yeah, maybe eventually the moment of inspiration will come, but think about all the time you will have wasted and all the progress that you could have made if you just kept moving based on what you could see, based on what was available to you, based on what was visible at the moment. So in that same way, whether you're talking about business, life, your goals, whatever that might be, start taking the actions that are clear. Start making movement, right, in the right direction. Don't worry about whether you're going fast enough or whether you see the whole picture, because even after the fog cleared, I couldn't see the entire road. I mean, it's 4 hours between my house and Tampa. So I couldn't see the entire 4 hours worth of road even after the fog cleared, but I had greater visibility. I had a greater understanding of where I was going. Plus I could look at the GPS and kind of gauge in which direction I needed to go next, right? So the important thing when you're looking for clarity is to take the best next step. So think about, not even best, the clearest next step. So think about where you are and where you want to go. Do a little research. Don't get bogged down by research either. Don't go into this rabbit hole that is going to keep you attached to researching for 20 hours or 20 days or 20 months or 20 years, right? Just do a little research to know exactly what, or to be clearer on what your next step gets to be. Take that step. And then trust that as you take the next step, another step will reveal itself, or you will be in a position to understand what kind of help or research you need to do in order to move forward to the next step after that, right? Ultimately, the thing to understand is that lack of clarity is really a lack of certainty. When we say we're not clear, it's because we're not certain of what to do, where to go, or how to proceed. So when we understand that what we're looking for is some sort of conviction or some sort of certainty moving forward, then that helps us understand that all we need is enough certainty to take the next step. So if you understand that, for example, you're trying to start your business or you're trying to scale your business, and you know that the next step is building visibility, and you don't have a budget, you don't have an assistant that can help you with a lot of things, you're on your own trying to figure this thing out, then what is the next best step? Well, probably you need to figure out some sort of organic way to gain that visibility. So maybe start a podcast, maybe be more engaged on social media, maybe start a YouTube channel. But pick one and start moving in that direction, right? Which leads me to the second thing, which is understanding that clarity simply comes from making decisions. Now, I know that sometimes making decisions is hard as heck. Essentially, when we are making a decision, we are cutting away all possibilities, which is what decision means, right? So we're cutting everything else away and we are just moving forward in one direction, committed to one thing. And so FOMO starts kicking in. Yeah, we start feeling like, but wait, what if I made the wrong decision? What if there's a better way? What if I should have tried this other thing? What if I start moving in this direction and then realize that it's the wrong decision to make? And that is what keeps us feeling unclear. It's that back and forth with ourselves, that self-doubt that kicks in when we don't have a feeling of certainty, when we are unsure about our abilities or the steps or the big picture or any element of what we're trying to do. So in reality, what keeps us stuck in uncertainty and lack of clarity, it's our inability to make decisions. Now, I have a whole training on how to make decisions effectively that you can find in my website, marciamaro.com. I will also post the link to get directly to it in the description and in the episode notes. But just know that if you have done some sort of thinking and research around a topic, by the time you get to the point where you're worried about being clear, you usually have several options, none of which are bad options, right? Like we eliminate those bad options right away as we're doing our research. We eliminate those bad options right away as we start to gauge our feelings, right? Our gut feeling about what it is that we're trying to do and what that option is. We eliminate most of the bad options as we use our common sense and our experience to filter through what is left. So by the time you're in this point where you're seeking clarity, you have good, better, and best options in front of you. That's all you have. So look at them and pick one. Pick one. One of my favorite quotes, and I say it constantly because it's amazing, is by Andy Andrews. And he says that God does not give us the ability to always make right decisions, but he does give us the ability to make a decision and then make it right. So once you make a decision, it's a matter of committing a certain amount of time to doing everything in your power to prove that that decision was the right one. So everything you're doing, everything you're engaging in, every step you're taking is geared towards proving to yourself that that decision you made, that you committed to for a quarter, 2 quarters, a year, whatever period of time you committed to it, is the right decision. And as you're working to prove to yourself that that's the right decision, you're going to, guess what? Gain greater clarity, because clarity comes from taking action. It comes from doing the thing. I remember when my daughter was in middle school. She was in the choir, and my daughters are really big into music. This is not the one that was in Allstate. It was my oldest one. And she was debating whether to audition for a part for something or not. And we had this conversation, and ultimately the conclusion of the conversation was, honey, you're not going to know what you're capable of doing until you try it. Yes. And that goes for this idea of being clear. You won't know if something is going to work or not. You won't know if something is going to match and align with your values and your core priorities. You're not going to know if something is going to really lead you towards your dream and your vision until you try it, until you test it out. Now, that doesn't mean that once you try it and that once you test it out, you are committed to that forever and you can't change it. Every decision can be changed. Now, I would warn you or caution you against flipping from thing to thing just on a whim, or just because the first time you tried it, it didn't work, right? Things take time. So like I said, commit to a certain period of time. I'm going to try this for a quarter. If at the end of the quarter, I don't see the results that I'm looking for, then I can pivot, I can change, I can research something else. But if you're constantly flipping from one thing to the other just because it didn't work the first time, then you're constantly starting over and constantly putting yourself back in the space of lack of clarity. So it's really important that you give yourself a certain window, a certain period of time in which you are going to test this thing, try it out, commit to proving that decision right, but understand that clarity can only come once you do make a decision. If you're stuck in indecision, and of course indecision is a decision, but if you're stuck in not wanting to pick something, then that clarity, that lack of clarity is just going to grow. That feeling of uncertainty is just going to continue to percolate inside of you, and it's going to take you to the space where you just throw your hands up and go, well, this is impossible. I just can't do it. So the way to get out of that is to make a decision and start moving. The more you move, the clearer it becomes, right? There's the longest staircase in the world is in this mountain called Mount Neeson. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And it has 11,644 steps. And every year there's a race to the top of these stairs in Mount Neeson. I am willing to bet that when the racers, the people who are racing up the stairs, are standing at the bottom of the staircase, they cannot see the 11,644th step. They can only see maybe 10, 15, 20 steps in front of them. But they know that as they walk those 10, 15 steps in front of them, another set of 10 or 15 steps will be revealed. Right? And it's in taking that action, and it's in making that decision to take those first 10 or 15 steps that they start to see further down their path, or further up their path in this case, right? So it's the same thing with whatever it is that we're working on. The more steps we take, the more steps that are revealed. The more action we take, the clearer the path becomes. The more we can see ahead of us. And we can also see behind us and see what progress we've made, and maybe some tweaks that we might need to make based on the experience we've just had. And that brings even more clarity, right? So again, the first thing is, remember that clarity comes gradually. It doesn't come instantaneously. And even those moments of inspiration come because we've been mulling over the situation unconsciously or subconsciously, and we have not been aware of the process until that moment of quote unquote inspiration. But we have been working on the problem all along once we pose the question, right? Our brain has anyway. The second thing is, understand that clarity is nothing else than a firm decision. So once you have options, pick one and start moving in the direction of trying to prove that decision right, and doing any adjustments that you need in the process, right? And then finally, I talk to so many people that when they feel a lack of clarity, their instinct is to isolate. We tend to think that if we want to be clear on what we want to do, we have to separate ourselves and meditate and just be involved in a whole mental, emotional, spiritual process that keeps us away from other people. Now, there is huge value in silence and in being on your own. But when you are at this point of lack of clarity, where you are feeling overwhelmed by the feeling of uncertainty, or where you're feeling stuck, like you can't move forward, or where the paralysis by analysis is kicking in, and you just find yourself in this constant loop of researching and testing and researching and studying and looking for new mentors and doing all the programs and spending all this time and money just looking for answers, then it's time to understand that isolation at this point is your biggest enemy. So go out and find a friend, a mentor, a coach that can help you work through the questions that you're having that are keeping you in lack of clarity, right? So if you have a very honest friend, I'm blessed to have a couple of really good friends like that you know will tell you the truth. Sit them down, get them on a call, get them on a Zoom, and ask them, look, I'm trying to go from here to here. This is what I have tried. This is what I have thought of doing. Does that make sense? From what you know about me, do you think that this would be the best thing that I can do? Do you think that I might find it that I'm not aligned with this path? Or do you find that I'm asking the wrong questions, maybe even? Do you think that this is something that makes sense? I'm working to start this program or this event or this whatever. What do you think? Do you see me doing this, right? And make sure that you're asking a friend that you can really trust, that is going to be really honest with you. Not cruel, but honest. And filter even what they tell you through what you're experiencing, through your values, through your priorities, through your end goal. If you don't have friends like that, find them. Go network. Go find people online. Hire a mentor and or a coach to help you. And that doesn't necessarily have to be join a huge program. It can be go buy a book, right? But don't get stuck in just the researching. It's much better if you can talk to someone face to face that will ask you the right questions, that will give you the right feedback, and that will be completely honest with you as you move forward. So staying in isolation when you're looking for clarity is the worst thing that you can do. Yes, take your time to go inward, to search your soul, your values, your core, and make sure that whatever it is that you're trying to do is aligned with who you are, with where you want to go, with what you're willing to do, with what makes sense for you at this time, at this stage in your life. But once you are past that, if you're still in insecurity, if you're still in doubt, if you're still in uncertainty, go find a good friend, a confidant, a mentor, or a coach that you trust, that preferably has walked the path that you want to walk down, that preferably has gone down the journey that you want to go on, and ask them for feedback, for suggestions, for help. Ask them to help you see the things, like help you look past your blind spots, and ask them for maybe some honest and heartfelt suggestions and advice on how to move forward from this point, right? So if you're still seeking clarity, as we approach the end of the first month of 2023, it's insane how quickly time is going by. But yes, as we approach the end of the first month of the first quarter of 2023, if you're still looking for clarity, if you're still unsure, if you're still uncertain about what your path gets to be moving forward, we get to clarify this, because 2023 is only going to be as good as the certainty with which we move forward, right? And we can develop certainty in the process, but it's important that we move away from this cloud, this fog of feeling like we can't see the whole path, like we don't understand what's going on, like we are not certain of our next step. And we just get to start moving forward in the direction of our dreams. Yes. So again, understand that clarity comes gradually. In order to do that, you have to make a decision. That's number 2, and start taking action on that decision. And then finally, if after all that you're still unsure, you're still uncertain, then guess what? Find someone that you trust that can help you move to the next level. Whether that's me or someone else, find a coach, find a mentor, invest in yourself, invest in the process, and trust that you have what it takes to get there. Now, I really hope this has been helpful. If it has, then I suggest that you share it with someone in your life that could use a little motivation or inspiration today. I also invite you to head on over to marciamaro.com, where you can schedule a 30-minute conversation with me. I call it a path paving talk, in which we will talk about your dreams, your goals, and what you get to do moving forward, so that you have clarity in both your path and your messaging, so that you know exactly what to do next moving forward. And we can also have a conversation about whether it makes sense for us to work together or not. But regardless of whether you decide to work with me or not, I promise that this will be the best 30 minutes you have invested so far this year, and it will help you be clearer moving forward. I would love to be your mentor that helps you move from uncertainty to clarity. Until next time, this has been Marcia Amaro, and this has been Sincerely Speaking. Head on over to marciamaro.com.